Lady Bird.
Lady, when you're with me, I'm smiling.
Here are the first two sentences to Roger Ebert's review of Cameron Crowe's Almost Famous. Oh, what a lovely film. I was almost hugging myself while I watched it. I know I probably quote Ebert too much, but how could I not? I first read that review 7.5 years ago, and those first two lines stuck with me, because it just so perfectly describes how certain movies have made me feel. And ever since I read that, I've kept an unofficial list of what I call my almost famous movies. And as you probably guessed by now, Lady Bird is the latest entry. The movie begins with Christine Lady Bird McPherson, the wonderful and Oscar-nominated Saoirse Ronan, at the end of a college visit road trip with her mom, Marion, the wonderful and Oscar-nominated Laurie Metcalf. And the movie ends with what I believe is the first weekend of college for Lady Bird, and the movie is everything in between. So, senior year of high school. She's trying to get into colleges as far away from her hometown of Sacramento as possible.
I want schools like Yale, but not Yale because I probably couldn't get in.
You definitely couldn't get in.
She has a ride-or-die best friend named Julie, played by Beanie Feldstein, with whom she has her ups and downs. She has flings with both Lucas Hedges and Timmy Chalamet. Writer-director Greta Gerwig said that she found it odd that so many high school movies focus on just one relationship, when the vast majority of people have more than one high school relationship. But the most important relationship in the movie is Lady Bird's relationship with her mother. Hence, they're both nominated for Oscars.
The mother-daughter relationship is the central love story. I don't know a single woman who doesn't have the most complicated, crazy, beautiful relationship with their mother.
The movie is bookended by 2 car rides between Lady Bird and her mother. Here in the opening, when they drive home from the aforementioned college visit, and one of the final scenes where Marion drives Lady Bird to college. The first car ride is featured heavily in the marketing because it ends prematurely, which is funny, unexpected, and thematically relevant and completely in character, showing how desperate Lady Bird is to literally get away from her mother and the painful, petty lengths she'll go to make that happen. But this first car ride is remarkable for a lot more than its premature ending. We're 3 minutes into the movie, and we already have a good sense of the key relationship and how they interact. 1 minute they're fine, then one says something innocuous that triggers the other, and suddenly they're at each other's throats. Which is how it always seems to go, right? We get some other key characters name dropped and their situations hinted at.
Your very smart brother, he can't even find a job.
He and Shelley work. They have
They
jobs.
bag at the grocery store. That is not a career, and they went to Berkeley. Your father's company is laying off people right and left. Did you even know that? No, of course you don't, because you don't think about anybody but yourself.
Even if it's just a quick name drop and we don't necessarily even process what's being said about them, it's still important. There's an old adage that you have to hear a character's name 3 times before you remember it, and it's really difficult to organically exposit character names. It feels organic here because, again, that's how it always seems to go, right? When you fight with family members, it often just comes around to the greatest hits arguments. You can tell Lady Bird and Marion have had this fight before.
Miguel saw someone knifed in front of him at Sac High. Is that what you want? So you're telling me that you want to see somebody knifed right in front of you?
He barely saw that.
At one point, Lady Bird just outright says one of the movie's biggest themes and sums up the key to her character.
I wish I could live through something. The only exciting thing about 2002 is that it's a palindrome.
And then Marion sums up the movie's main conflict.
I want to go where culture is, like
How
New
in the
York,
world did I raise such a
or at least
snob?
Connecticut.
Basically, Lady Bird thinks there's more to life than what she's lived, and Marion can't help but take this as a bit of a personal slight. This is also summed up by the 2 very first lines of the movie minutes before this.
Do you think I look like I'm from Sacramento?
You are from Sacramento.
These first 3 minutes really give us everything we need to know about Lady Bird, including why she's called Lady Bird.
My name is Lady Bird.
Well, actually, it's not, and it's ridiculous.
Call me
because her
Lady
name
Bird
is
like
Christine.
you said you would.
This doesn't really come up again, except here.
Lady Bird, is that your given name?
Yeah.
Why is it in quotes?
I gave it to myself. It's given to me by me.
That's all the explanation we get. The fact that she goes by an entirely new name that she gave herself is just another detail about her. But like most details about her, it's illuminating. Gerwig referred to this self-authorship as a sign of both supreme self-confidence, to reject your given identity and declare so boldly who you are, and supreme self-doubt, being so unsure of who you are that you feel the need to rename yourself. Mind you, the movie doesn't explicitly say this about Lady Bird's self-authorship. It just presents it to you, and then presents it to you again, and lets you draw your own conclusion. And the movie is full of things like that. Little details that give you so much. Little scenes like this car ride that give you so much. It's breezy, efficient, and sweet, and most importantly, true.
The film, in a way, was inspired by events from my own life. None of it actually happened, but it's all true.
I didn't live Lady Bird's life, but I certainly lived Lady Bird's world. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten all the way through undergrad, including a high school that's probably pretty similar to Xavier in Lady Bird. And I probably knew a Lady Bird McPherson back in the day. I knew a Julie. I definitely knew a Danny. I knew a Kyle. They're all real. They are real people that you meet in the world. The movie doesn't just pass my sniff test of what the world of Catholic high school was like in the early to mid 2000s, but also for the people attending them. Everything about everything was so real to me. Not just the characters and their interactions, but the details of the world. The way they all have formal uniforms that look like shit because of how much they dress them down. Spot on. Danny's puka shell necklace. My own wasn't exactly puka shell, but damn close. The movie is comfortable. It's not only familiar, it's warm. I don't know how else to say it. That's why I resort to Ebert and Almost Famous. But with familiarity comes truth, right? The movie is familiar to me because it's like my own life. And because it's like real life, there's inherent truth to it. And one of the truest parts, I think, is that Lady Bird is sure life is happening somewhere else. And that she is wasting away in Sacramento, and she just needs to go be where the life is happening.
I want to go where culture is,
But
like
how in
New
the world
York,
did I raise such a
or at least
snob?
Connecticut or New Hampshire, where writers live in the woods.
And I've heard Greta Gerwig highlight this point in interviews because she thinks it's a pretty universal feeling that a lot of high schoolers have. I certainly felt that growing up in St. Louis. Maybe that's why I moved to LA. But the punchline in Lady Bird is that she's wrong to feel that way. That's part of why Greta Gerwig set the movie in 2002 and 2003, when 9/11 was yesterday, basically, and we watched the invasion of Iraq live on TV. The point is that life was happening in Sacramento. It's happening everywhere all the time, and that Lady Bird was living through something. She just didn't know it.
Those things happen simultaneously with your life. That the world is not divided up into history over there and your personal life over here. It all happens together.
Side note, the other reason Gerwig set the movie in 2002 is because she says she didn't want to shoot cell phones. She thinks they're visually boring, and so she set the movie in the last years before they came to dominate teenage social interaction.
You're only supposed to use it for emergencies.
It's my tracking device.
That layered purposefulness of the period setting is indicative of how much thought and care went into this movie. I know that slice of life movies can sometimes feel random or improv, but Lady Bird is really well put together, even if it's subtle. For example, lots of setups and payoffs that you barely notice, but your brain does. There's a quick, less than a minute long scene of Marion driving home from work that seems random at the time, but it's a setup for a later payoff. Lady Bird's innocuous and seemingly off-the-cuff remark to Danny here,
You live in the neighborhood?
No, I'm from the wrong side of the tracks.
is a setup to a thematically relevant payoff. There's a 47-second scene where Lady Bird and Julie giggle while they talk bathtub masturbation techniques. And because of that setup, this shot, many scenes later, only needs to be 2 seconds long. And you know exactly what she's doing. The AV Club did a nice write-up of that 47-second scene between Julie and Lady Bird, and how the editing and shot selection communicate so much information in such a little amount of time. Which is basically the whole movie. And I don't want to understate the Greta Gerwig factor in all of this. Don't make the mistake of assuming that just because this is a small dialogue and character-driven film, that less directing goes into it than a Dunkirk or Shape of Water. Particularly because Lady Bird has something like 70 speaking roles, and we go to dozens of locations, some of which we're only at for a few seconds, in case you're curious where that extra money went. And really, the only way you could possibly make a movie with that many parts and that many locations and still keep it to a trim, breezy 93 minutes is to have a clear vision of what you're going for. And who do you think provides that clear vision? To see this in action, let's look at one more scene. A simple breakfast before school. It's 36 seconds long and 19 lines are spoken by 5 different characters. There are 13 shots spread over 6 camera setups. The lines are not only edited together to a breakneck pace, but they're delivered by the actors at a breakneck pace.
They aren't done, there's white stuff.
You know how much you love Brambles? Pigs are smarter than him even.
I never thought Brambles was a genius, okay? Mom, the eggs are not done.
Fine, make your own fucking egg.
I wanted to, you won't let me.
Meaning, they didn't discover the speed of this scene in post-production. Gerwig knew on the day how fast they had to go to make the scene work. On a screenplay level, every single one of the 19 lines spoken is entirely in character for the person speaking it. And on a directing level, all 6 camera setups and all 13 shots are completely necessary, and the scene would be less effective if they were taken out. You'd miss Marion sighing here as she reaches her nerve's end.
They aren't done, there's white stuff.
You know how much you love Brambles?
You'd miss Larry isolated in the frame, highlighting that he's really only talking to himself and no one else.
Look at all these pictures. Every newspaper looks like USA Today.
Shelley and I...
It may not be immediately obvious, but this is a marvelously directed scene, and indicative of the vision that made this movie possible. And I don't even have time to talk about the intangibles that Gerwig brought to set. I highly recommend you check out this interview she did with NPR in Los Angeles last fall. She talks about the great directors she's had the opportunity to work with as an actress, and all the lessons that she learned from each of them. She talks about the lengths she went to make sure her set was creatively productive, which matters in a small movie like this. You can see the care on screen.
This was one of the special ones, I will say, and everybody felt it on set. And when it ended, my first AD said, just so you know, they're not all like this. And I said, oh, I know they're not. But it was a very warm, loving, supportive group. And really, when you make independent films, small films, the only reason anyone's there is because they want to be there.
There are 2 big takeaways I want to impart with this review. 1, Lady Bird is a much better movie than it might appear at first glance, and the nearly perfect Rotten Tomatoes score was not an accident. And 2, more importantly, Greta Gerwig is really fucking good at this. And yes, I love, love, love her movie. But what has me so excited is that this is her first one. She's gonna make more movies, and if we're lucky, she's gonna make a lot more. And she's only going to get better at it. And of all the wonderful things we've learned from this year's batch of Best Picture nominees, that Jordan Peele is a genius even outside of sketch comedy, that In Bruges was not a fluke, that Paul Thomas Anderson is back to There Will Be Blood form, the thing I'm most excited about is that Greta Gerwig is the real deal as a writer-director. And I wait with bated breath to see what she does next.
What I'd really like is to be on Math Olympiad.
But math isn't something you're terribly strong in.
That we know of yet.